afternoon and welcome to our virtual town hall. We're so grateful that you joined us today. It's been quite some time since we've done this, so we appreciate you writing your questions in and joining us today. We have a great group with us to answer your questions in addition to Mayor Keller. I'm Alicia Manzano. I'll be serving as the moderator and asking the questions of our great panelists. Today we have with us Chief of Police Harold Medina from Albuquerque Police Department, Director Carol Pierce from our Family and Community Services Department. We also have Matthew Whalen from Solid Waste, Dr. Mark DeMena from the Environmental Health Department, Jasmine Desiderio from the Albuquerque Community Safety Department, and Anna Sanchez from our Senior Affairs Department. So thank you all for joining us. Before we get into your questions, and as I mentioned, we'll get to as many as we can. We had quite a few folks write into Facebook and Twitter asking those questions that were most important to you as it relates to city government and what you have in terms of expectations coming up. So next, I'd like to welcome up Mayor Tim Keller to say a few words to kick things off.
Sure. Well, good afternoon, everybody, and wonderful to be joined by some experts at our city. And, you know, throughout COVID, which, gosh, it's been a long time, but I think we're 19 months in. And what we said from day one is that we would periodically update folks on a lot of things. So today is not just about COVID, but we are doing this in the spirit of mixing up our, telephone town halls. Sometimes we have virtual town halls, just so we can try and catch a method that is helpful for many folks in our city. And so today is our installment of our sort of social media or virtual town hall setup. And so for us, I want to thank everyone who is able to join. And of course, this will be recorded on social media as well, so folks will be able to watch it later. And, there's a lot going on in our city, and there's some things we're excited about, and there's some challenges that we're facing. I think first and foremost, fall is here, which is great. It rained for like 10 minutes today, which was surprising. You can't even tell by looking, but also, of course, Balloon Fiesta starts this weekend. So we're very excited to have our skies full of balloons once again, and to have many visitors visiting Albuquerque and supporting our local businesses and experiencing everything that's special about the city. Now, I want to thank the staff and the volunteers, especially who are preparing the Balloon Fiesta site, and even the cleanup efforts that were happening this weekend. And I also want to mention that, we're very aware of the ongoing COVID situation, and we believe that, there's appropriate balloon COVID safe operations in place. So, there is going to be strong encouragement for mask wearing, but obviously it's outside and it's a very large event. And so that helps a lot with the COVID safety, and hopefully sunny, which also helps as well. Now, COVID isn't the only thing we're focused on. First and foremost, we continue our prioritization of fighting crime. And in the last few weeks, we wrapped up our Metro Crime Initiative. This was an effort that we started back in June. And it was really first of its kind situation where I was able to gather the law enforcement leaders in the metro area, from our district attorney to our attorney general, state chief of police, even folks from our mayor's office. From the governor's office and our mayor's office, but also even the governor's office and our state legislators. And we really sat down over a number of sessions and we said, let's push past talking about the problem. What can we actually do to stop the revolving door? What can we actually do to reduce gun violence? How can we actually get more addiction and treatment available to folks in our community in and out of the incarceration system? And so we looked at the criminal justice system as a whole, and we made, I think, the accurate diagnosis that it is not working. And so the question is, what can each one of these groups do to actually own up to fixing our part of the problem? And so we now have a list of 40 specific items that we believe need to be done urgently. Some of them are things the city's got to do. Some are things APD's got to do. Some are things that the courts have to do. Some are things the legislature has to do. But we all believe we need to take those steps urgently. And if we do that, we actually can bring crime down in the metro area. Now, I want to mention, of course, that goes with the understanding that violent crime is up all over America. In fact, it was announced yesterday by the FBI that last year was the highest single-year spike in crime in our country's history. So we are a part, unfortunately, of a larger terrible trend that is afflicting all cities. But the Metro Crime Initiative positions us to be able to do something about it right here in Albuquerque. Now, we're also making sure that we're continuing our commitment to have a different form of public safety that both allows officers to respond to violent crime calls more often, but also gets people who aren't involved in a direct violent criminal activity. So folks involved in mental health issues, behavioral health issues, that we respond to them, but with the right response at the right time. And that's what our community safety department is all about. And that is now beginning. It's just started, and it's sort of a small start, but it's looking at being up and running this winter in full force. And we're very excited about that to help us reimagine public safety. Now, I think with that, we're also recruiting for all positions. Like almost every business here in Albuquerque and around the country coming out of the pandemic, we desperately need people to help the city you love. We need bus drivers. We need solid waste drivers. We need senior affairs drivers. We need public service aides. We need police officers. We need EMTs. We need social workers. We need planners. We need engineers. And we are paying bonuses just to get folks in the door. Please check out chooseone.us to find out more about how you can work for the city you love. So with that, let me hand it back over to our moderator, Alicia.
Thank you so much, Mayor. And as I mentioned, we'll get to as many questions as possible, and we might try to get to some live questions as well if time allows. We have our first question comes from Twitter, and Maureen would like to know, where do our recycled items go and how much of it actually gets recycled?
Thank you. That's a great question. And it's a question that I think a lot of people have because there's a lot of misconceptions about our recyclables. So my name is Matthew Wade. I'm the Director of Solid Waste. I apologize. I'm in my vehicle today because I'm out in the field every Tuesday, just out looking at different things and making sure that we're getting things done the way we need to. As all directors are out in the field a lot of the times. But when it comes to recycling and how much actually gets recycled, every city has what's called a contamination rate. And a contamination rate is the percentage of recyclables that are contaminated and no longer considered recyclable, but considered refuse, because there are two types of materials. There are recyclable materials and there's refuse. Refuse can never be recycled. However, recyclables can be contaminated, and once they're contaminated, they become refuse. So we have what's called a single stream, which means everything but glass goes in your blue bin, and it goes into a truck, and then it gets delivered to Friedman Recycling, and that's where our optical sorters are. And that's where they actually separate the good recyclable materials from the refuse. So at that point, materials are separated because people still put things they shouldn't put in their recycle bins. And every year we do what's called a recycling audit. And based on that audit, we know what our contamination rate. And we just did our audit for the city of Albuquerque. And although throughout the last 19 months of the pandemic, we saw an increase of contamination in recyclables, our contamination rate was only 35%, which was up a little bit from the previous years, which was 33%. And 35% is very good for a city our size, where cities like Cleveland have a 69% contamination rate and other cities have over 50% contamination. Now, what that contamination rate means is 35% of everything that's put into those blue bins is not recyclable, it's refuse. So 65% of what we collect is recycled, bundled at Friedman, and then put back into the recycle stream and the reuse stream and put back into other products. Now we have a continuous effort to bring that contamination rate down, which we do marketing, we do all kinds of things. But to answer the question, 65% of the things that go in your bin is actually put back into the environment. And it's very good because you have to look at it this way. If we weren't doing this, all of that stuff would end up in our landfill. And we want to keep the life of the landfill as long as we can because we don't want to have to extend it or make a new landfill. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Director Whalen. And pizza boxes, they're a culprit in contaminating good recyclables. So just a reminder there. And Mayor, you were mentioning earlier on about convening the Metro Crime Initiative and how important it was to bring those key stakeholders together to provide actionable items moving forward. We've gotten quite a few questions about the Metro Crime Initiative, and it's basically centered around why now to convene the Metro Crime Initiative meetings? And also, how long will it take to implement those action items to fight crime in our city that you mentioned?
So the Metro Crime Initiative, first off, for folks who are interested in learning more about it, we'll put a link in the comments and whatnot, so you can find out more about it. But there's also some like pretty distilled pamphlets and whatnot that sort of go through what it's all about. So I'll explain this, but just showing you that's all available online, and you can see all the different entities that were a part of it here. So first, why we did it. It happened because of the same reason why our entire community is fed up with the criminal justice system, meaning that back in June, we do talk to each other quite a bit, the different stakeholders and public servants who are involved in the criminal justice system. So whether it's the DA or the AG or our chiefs of police. And in June, we said, you know what, violent crime is skyrocketing all over the country. It's also happening here. We have got to figure out what to do about it. And so that's why we started these convenings. It was because of all of these issues. And we knew back then, just statistically, we were probably going to break things like the homicide record and so forth. So in advance, we said that we've got to get our ducks in a row. And so we did that as fast as we could, but also with respect to like pandemic and being able to get as many stakeholders involved as possible, and also have a real discussion. So it did take place over July and August. And over those 8 weeks, we were able to come up with these 40 recommendations, and they really fall in 4 different categories. One is, again, stopping that revolving door. And the revolving door works 2 ways. One is, of course, this issue where people go into a situation for whatever booking, and then they're right back out the next day and committing another crime. And that has to do with the issues you hear about, whether it's things like usage, when we don't use things like ankle monitoring and pre-trial services. And again, if folks have other questions, we can go into this, or the CMO. I mean, there's lots of sort of criminal justice details on this, but it all boils down to this. We have to do a better job deciding when folks can go out back into the community, and when they go out monitored, or when they're not allowed to go out. And so we have a whole host of recommendations based on that. But then there's also the other side of the revolving door, which is when people come out of the criminal justice system, we want them to be able to stay out and be productive members of society, and not essentially get pushed back in by drugs and addiction, criminal activity, associated group activity. And that's where things like our violence intervention program are so important, which is a very progressive way of trying to pull people out of the cycles of violence. Or our diversion programs, or teen court, drug court, veteran court, these alternative courts that are ways to keep people out of incarceration, but also out of doing more crime. So all of that is in detail on the internet. We can go into more of it if folks would want. But I do want to also mention, it just speaks to the need that we have to appropriately resource our criminal justice system, whether it's the homicide detectives that we need, whether it's the frontline officers that we need, or it's prosecutors for our public lawyers, or it's court personnel to do things, or software to do things like ankle bracelet monitoring. And these are areas that, again, are their own sort of separate discussions, but they're all things that we fleshed out. So I'd encourage people to look at even the video recordings, or on government TV. All of these convenings were public, and people can see how we sort of digested and worked through these complicated issues, and then boiled them down to a succinct set of initiatives going forward. So I think that touches on your questions, and I would certainly open it up to see if Chief Medina wants to add anything to these law enforcement crime fighting efforts.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Albuquerque, for tuning in this afternoon. I just would like to thank the Mayor. 27 years that I've been involved in this profession in the metro area, and this is the first time that we've been able to bring all the stakeholders to the table to develop a plan forward. This revolving door has been a problem for years, And I think the mayor sums it up in, we have to have different levels of accountability to ourselves. And one of the biggest things that the Albuquerque Police Department has had to do in recent times was look at ourselves and evaluate where we could become better. And a lot of this came from the direction from whether the DA's office was seeing problems in our cases or, a case hit the media, but we had to take a strong look at ourselves. And I think this process has enabled a lot of different stakeholders to take a look to see how they could improve some of the processes that they're working on. We're really focused on improving the criminal justice system. We know we need more grand jury time for a period of time because of the backlog created by COVID. We know that pretrial services needed resources to monitor people 24/7. I would like to, say that it is great to know that the courts listened and they immediately took action, and they developed a process to monitor people 24/7, which is a big key for us, and report it to the police department. So we're already seeing some of the successes from this program, and we're hoping that along with these changes within the criminal justice system, that we're also able to create the legislation that needs to be created to hold violent criminals accountable. Over the past 6 months, we've seen a spike in individuals involved in property crimes. And when this person possesses a firearm, they're just the attempted apprehension away from becoming violent criminals. We've seen the videos of our officers being shot at by individuals in stolen bait cars. We've seen our officers come across individuals committing crimes and the person's in possession with a firearm, and they end up, injuring and hurting 4 of our officers just last month. So this is about also creating and working to get good, strong legislation that's going to hold individuals who are armed and in possession of firearms accountable, and ensure that we draw that line in the sand as a community where this is the area where we want to get you help because you're at this level. But the moment you become violent, that line in the sand has to be well defined, that you're going to sit in jail and you're going to pay there's going to be some consequences for your actions in arming yourself and potentially injuring the community. One of the other big parts of this is we know nationwide it's a struggle retaining and hiring officers. It's not a popular profession right now. Across the United States, agencies are seeing a decline in numbers, and putting together a task force to see how our state is going to continue to ensure that we recruit and retain officers is going to be key for us to be able to successfully navigate this tough time in the law enforcement profession. So like I said, I just want to tell the mayor and everybody involved in this process, thank you. There's a lot of work that went into it. I saw from the background all the hours spent in it by organizing everybody. And to me, the success alone, getting everybody in the same room, is something that's never happened before in the past 27 years.
Thank you, Chief, and thank you, Mayor. As I mentioned, we did have quite a few questions around that Metro Crime Initiative, and so grateful that you were able to convene all of those stakeholders, and hopefully we'll start to see some major progress on those actionable items. So switching gears a little bit, we had a question come into Facebook from Sharon. Sharon would like to know what your plan is to assist animal welfare to get on track.
So, our animal welfare department has been through a tough journey, and I want to take it back to when we first came into office. This department, we had to make changes with the leadership at the top because they were literally trafficking animals to their own nonprofit in Colorado. There were rampant examples of violations of all sorts of animal humane issues when we came in. I mention that because I think we have had some recent challenges, but I do want to emphasize that we've come a long way in terms of cleaning up that department. We also came into almost no, and there was one, I think, animal control officer. And so we weren't even able to adequately respond to those calls. So if we fast forward to basically where we're at now, there's a couple of things. Number one is our animal control program is fully staffed up and they don't have a backlog for taking calls and so forth. And that's a wonderful thing for just good government and also doing all the things that animal welfare is tasked with doing. We were also to make sure that the numbers are back up in terms of the spay and neuters that we provide are more than they ever have been historically. Also, the number of microchip tags are higher than we've ever had historically. So the department is definitely functioning at a higher rate than it was before. And that also, though, has been combined with the pandemic. So, we had the biggest pendulum swing during the last year, where during the pandemic, we almost emptied our shelters. Everyone was adopting pets. And that was great. And it gave our department a real chance to breathe easy. And actually, a lot of personnel changes were made and transitions were made. And that was all fine. But it left the department, as we come out of the pandemic, we had not enough folks actually helping care for our animals. And so we're still in a shortage in that area. So while animal protection and animal control officers are adequately staffed, the animal care side still desperately needs people. So you can apply for those jobs at chooseone.us. And we did just get a couple more to help out. So we're in a better position than we were this summer. But when you combine that with what happened this summer, after the pandemic, the opposite thing occurred, and everyone sent their animals back to the shelters. And so, or their animals to the shelters for the first time, they not necessarily were the same animals. So our shelters have been jammed. And so they're frankly just overcrowded. And so we're in a very difficult position where we either say no to taking an animal, which can be dangerous and not a good idea, or we have to do temporary provisions like having crating outside and so forth. And so a lot of the challenges we've had are frankly, it's just because right now our shelters are filled to the brim. But one good thing that we're doing about it is we finally opened for the first time. We've wanted this for decades in Albuquerque, a low-income spay and neuter clinic. So I want to encourage everyone, before taking an animal to a shelter, or if you're in a situation where you want that service and you meet the income thresholds, just go to, it's basically Eubank and Copper. It's in the old Copper Point area where there used to be like something called Copper Point Church. And you can get that spay and neuter done at no cost or low cost. This is something that our cities needed. We just opened it a couple of weeks ago. We're so fortunate to have it. And over time, that is going to go a long way to reducing that overcrowding in the shelter. And at the same time, in our GO bond in November, there are a number of improvements to our animal shelters that we need everyone to vote for. And that'll help us do things like fix the roofs and expand, and also fix those air conditioners and all of those things that we really struggled with this summer. So I think animal welfare is back on the right track. But we need those bonds to pass, and we need everyone to use that new spay and neuter clinic available to all of you.
Thank you, Mayor. And as I mentioned, we'll try to get to as many questions as possible. So I'm just going to keep moving us right along. You mentioned earlier on in our conversation that it's so critical to have the right response at the right time as it relates to public safety. And so this question comes from Nicole on Facebook. She says, I see that you're hiring people for the new safety department. When will they start taking calls?
Well, I think we're fortunate to be joined by one of our deputy directors at the new department. So Jasmine, why don't you go ahead and take that one?
Thank you, Mayor. Hello, everyone. My name is Jasmine Desiderio. I am the deputy director over at the Albuquerque Community Safety Department. To answer the question, I'd like to say that we have been up and running, fully implemented our behavioral health responders for the Albuquerque Community Safety Department as of September of 2021. So our first cohort has been answering calls being dispatched through 911. Our second cohort will begin answering calls in the beginning of November, with our goal to achieve 24/7 coverage by the end of this year.
That's amazing news, Jasmine. Thank you. I think folks are really interested in this new department and how it will continue to serve the people of Albuquerque. So we appreciate you taking it on. We know it's a new challenge, and looking forward to everything that the department will be able to help with in our community. So the next question comes from Twitter, and it's from Carly. Carly would like to know, what are we doing to get homeless people off the streets and create more services for the unhoused?
Well, this has been another situation where, we had challenges with our unsheltered community. gosh, I mean, going back, I remember when I first saw the kind of Coronado Park situation, and that was probably about 10 years ago when that started developing. And it's continued to increase. And unfortunately, after the pandemic, cities all across the country, including ours, have seen a huge increase in folks experiencing lack of shelter and homelessness. So what we're doing about it here is, I think first and foremost, we're acknowledging that this is an issue that's so complex and challenging that we support an all of the above approach. So we are working on each front that we can, whether it's building more affordable housing, whether it's building more supportive housing, whether it is now adding over 1,000 vouchers every year for folks to get existing housing stock, but also with support services in that housing first model. Or it's even things like continuing our homeless outreach programs to try and connect people with services. And we do this in Albuquerque with a lot of nonprofits. The city basically funds nonprofits to do much of this work. So Healthcare for the Homeless, Heading Home, Barrett House, organizations like this. But that still isn't enough. And so the biggest thing that we've done is, 2 years ago, voters authorized us to spend $14 million on a gateway center. And the idea behind the Gateway Center is that in Albuquerque, we have this huge gap in the center of our homeless support system. And the idea is basically that, look, on a 24/7 basis, so say on a Saturday afternoon, where can somebody go who's experiencing homelessness to get mental health treatment, to get behavioral health treatment, to get a housing voucher? The answer is nowhere, because all of these different groups typically are 9 to 5. Or maybe we can help you out at the West Side shelter, but that requires a huge bus ride. So there's no practical answer to that problem. So we have to solve that. And so the city bought, excuse me, the old Loveless Hospital on Gibson. And that is where we want to create this Gateway Center. And the idea with that is it's just a clearinghouse for folks to be able to stay for a couple of nights till we can connect them with all those services. So I believe we can do better than, letting people be on the street. We can actually give them a bed, a shower, and a meal, and then access to services. That's what the Gateway Center is all about. But we do support an all the above approach in a sense that, the county really did the tiny homes project, but in general, anything that will help the unsheltered community meaningfully, we want to see it succeed. But nothing is going to make a big dent in homelessness until we get that Gateway Center up and running, because we have 5,000 people roughly experiencing homelessness right now. And so we've got to find a way to connect hundreds of them to services, not just 10 or not just 20. So with that, the real expert on this happens to be joining us. And so I'll hand it over to fill in those gaps and speak more on this, our Director of Family and Community Services, Carol Pierce.
Thank you, Mayor, for the invitation, and thank you for that very thoughtful question. Just to really underscore what the mayor is saying, there's just not one single solution and answer to our unhoused neighbors. We are very grateful for the partnerships that we have with all of our nonprofits, and the city and our taxpayers spend about $20 million every year to really work with our nonprofits and to really connect people to the services that they need. But more needs to be done. And with right now, our West Side Emergency Housing Center is operational 24/7. It wasn't that way long ago. And we also provide 3 meals. And we're really working at how we can add more services to really meet people where they're at and find out what they're needing to really break that cycle of homelessness. I do want to add, as with all people in our community, the COVID-19 pandemic has given us new opportunities to get creative solutions. And in the peak of the pandemic, we were housing 900 unhoused people, and that was the city alone through our adding hotels and our own shelter. I will say today we continue to operate a COVID safety net. We do operate a hotel with COVID positive individuals, because what does everybody do when you're COVID positive? You've got to shelter in place. If you don't have a home, we're providing that service. So we continue to maintain that, and we continue to maintain what we call a wellness hotel that we have over 300 individuals that are family units with about half of those children that we are working hard to get them connected to housing and the services that they need. I think the partnerships that we have here in the community are so important, whether it's the university, whether it's our nonprofits, whether it's the county, because people are often will say, what I need is I need some behavioral health services. I need some substance abuse treatment. I need to get out of a domestic violence situation. The root of homelessness, it starts in many different places. So we're really excited for the Gateway. We think that's one piece of the solution in our community. And I would encourage people to go to cabq.gov/gateway. And what we've got is we've got our operations plan for the Gateway, we've got administrative policies, and we've got feedback forms there where we want to hear the voice of the community as the Gateway, that slice of the Gibson Health Hub, will provide shelter in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. We're grateful that you continue to engage the community every step of the process as it relates to Gateway, and that you will continue to do so. We're really grateful for that. Next question comes from Janelle on Facebook. Janelle says that her parents are very social, and until the pandemic, they went to a lot of the dances and classes at Bear Canyon Senior Center. They're still worried about being around a lot of people, but want to know how they can still participate in these activities.
Well, I think we have the right person to speak to that. So if she needs an intro, I'll give her one and hand it off to our Director of Senior Affairs, Ana Sanchez.
Thank you, Mayor. Really appreciate that question. And certainly I have the honor of being the Director of Senior Affairs. My name is Ana Sanchez. Our department does so much, providing services for adults 50 years of age and older. We have 8 senior and multi-generational centers, 2 fitness centers, recreational programs, social service supports, meal programs, volunteer programs, and so much more. So it's exciting to hear of folks that also enjoyed Bear Canyon Senior Center. As always, we've remained dedicated to promote healthy and active aging. And we've really developed some new and innovative ways during this time of the pandemic to be responsive for our folks, such as these individuals. Our virtual programming actually has been very popular. We've launched our Daytime Dancing with Senior Affairs. It's a very popular dance show that can be seen on GOV-TV and also Comcast Channel 16, as well as twice a week. We're even offering gentle exercise classes that can be seen through Facebook Live. So we've really been focusing on our virtual programming continuing, and all of our virtual programming can actually be viewed through our website at cabq.gov/seniors. So we want to make sure that folks know that that's available to them on an ongoing basis. But more importantly, I also want folks to know that we have been fully open since July at all of our centers. And we've been taking those proper safety precautions and measures so that folks feel comfortable and can take part in our activities that I know that we have all missed. Connecting with our friends and being in places with others has been very, very important and on our minds. One effort that I just like to mention that all of our centers that we are launching is that we are going to be having one-on-one support and in-person classes for technology. We know that the pandemic created a lot of isolation, and we need to use our centers to be able to reach these folks and have them feel comfortable with using technology, but also discovering the many benefits of technology, such as telehealth nowadays. So we've also stood up a free senior tech assistance line offered in both English and Spanish. So if folks have questions from how to use their smartphone to maybe a certain website, just wondering if it's, perhaps a website is or a legitimate email, we have folks that are available to help them. And that actual number is 505-503-4636. So we want folks to take advantage of this free technological line for our seniors. And last but not least, we have many other resources, and our folks are available on our senior information and assistance line to call Monday through Friday at 505-764-6400 to always reach out to us for any questions or concerns that they may have. So our pleasure to be able to serve you, and we want to continue to do so in a safe manner moving forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anna. I really need to get in on those virtual dance classes. That sounds super fun. So I know for many of us, it feels like such a long haul as it relates to the pandemic and how we've been, masking up and getting vaccinated and do all we can to stay safe. And so this next question is about COVID. Why do vaccinated people still have to wear masks? And when should I get a booster shot?
Well, this situation continues to evolve as we continue to learn more, and especially from our federal partners at the CDC. But we're fortunate here in Albuquerque to have our own Dr. Fauci type figure. He is a doctor in the relevant field and is the acting director of our environmental health department. So he's the best one to answer that. We'll hand it over to Dr. Mark Dimena.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, we get asked that question very frequently about why people are still being asked to wear masks and why there's still an indoor mandate. And really it comes down to just the transmission rates are so high right now. And in particular, Delta, that everyone's been hearing about so much in the news, this variant of COVID is more aggressive, more infectious than any of the previous strains of COVID that we had throughout all of last year. So we know things were really bad, very, very frustrating. COVID was dangerous. Delta takes that even beyond to another level where it takes very little exposure to it for people to get infected. And so much so that we're actually seeing some breakthrough cases even in people that are vaccinated. So as there's still this big mix of people vaccinated and not vaccinated as people are indoors, and especially as we're getting now into fall and cooler weather coming on, that'll be even more the case. So that mask is like an additional layer of protection even beyond the vaccine so that you don't end up becoming one of those breakthrough case statistics. The likelihood of being a breakthrough case once you've been vaccinated is still very, very small. But because there are so many people vaccinated across the country and across the state, it still looks like a large number when we talk about those cases. But in terms of percentage, it's still very, very small. So just to put the pitch in here, it's still the very most protective thing that you can do. The very best thing you can do is to get vaccinated. And encourage people around you that are on the fence about it to get vaccinated as well by having less unvaccinated people in the population. That's how we can bring transmission down in the longer term and avoid having any other major surges like this again in the future. So on the subject of vaccinations, that is the big question in the moment is in terms of boosters. For those who are eligible for boosters, that's actually now available. So if you're someone that falls in one of the categories that can get a booster, this is specific to Pfizer, the Pfizer vaccine. You can get a third shot beginning now. There had been some debate and a little confusion about who that was going to be open to, but by and large, what FDA and CDC have approved for that really has to do with age. So anyone 65 years and up that may have a weakened immune system or may not have had as strong of an immune response the first time around, they're eligible for a booster shot and can get it now. Anyone 18 and up that's living in a long-term care kind of setting or someplace in close quarters, or if they work someplace where they're at a higher risk. So any place where you can have a lot of interaction with people, people in correctional facilities, people in schools, people in hospitals, people who work even in grocery and retail where they're encountering a lot of customers every day. Those people are all eligible through an occupational risk. And then really anyone like in the 50 to 64 year age where you might have an underlying health condition that would create a higher vulnerability to COVID. All of those categories of people are eligible for the booster if you got Pfizer for the first number one and number two. Pfizer is the only vaccine that's been approved for a booster so far. It's likely that we'll see boosters approved for, again, very limited categories of people down the road. But right now, if you had Pfizer and you fall in one of those categories I described, you can get the shot. So, thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dimena. Our next question just came into Facebook from Kelly. Kelly would like to know, when will the city choose the final design plan for the future North Domingo Baca Aquatic Center?
Oh, that's a great question and a fun one to end on, actually. Where we're at right now with this is the good news is, and she might know this, but just for other folks who are listening, North Domingo Baca is an amazing facility up in the Northeast Heights, and we just finished adding a gymnasium and an outdoor theater to it. And so it's in great shape. It's one of Ana Sanchez's facilities. We also already have funded and plans for a small splash pad for the young kids. I know my kids love those. And so those are in the works. And then we've been able to get funding through a number of sources. including obviously through our office and with City Council. There's funding on the GO bond. So another reason to vote for the GO bonds that are coming up on the ballot this November, because you got to vote for that if we want a pool at North Domingo Baca. So the answer to your question about timing is basically it'll be after the legislature, because right now, first we have to do those general obligation bonds pass. So then we know we have that amount of money. Then we're going to be doing our city capital budgeting. So we'll be able to put more money in. And then the legislature is going to get a chance to match funding. And so basically the answer is somewhere in April or March, we're going to know how much money we have. And that'll allow us to pick from 4 different designs, right? Or wait if we want to wait longer to get more money. But there's, sort of the Cadillac version, which is Olympic size, therapy pool and recreational pool, all indoors. And that's all very exciting. Off the top of my head, that was like $32 million, all the way down to an outdoor pool that's still Olympic capable, which I think was as cheap as 14 million. So we'll make that decision. Or, if we're in the middle and we want to wait for the grand vision, then we would just, wait for another round of all of that. But decision time basically will be around April.
Thank you so much, Mayor. And we got to a lot of questions today, not as many as we'd hoped. We always hope to get to many more, but time goes very quickly as we're getting through these important topics. We hope to do this again sometime really soon. So we won't be taking any more questions, but I'd love to give Mayor Keller the opportunity to close us out this afternoon.
Well, I just want to thank everyone again for joining us. And I know it's been a while since we've had a virtual town hall, so it's good to be with folks who are more using the virtual platforms. And so we'll continue these as needed going forward. And I also want to mention that, if we didn't get to all your questions, just a reminder, the fastest way is to call 311. They can deal with a lot of questions folks have. And also check out our website, cabq.gov. That's kind of the old-fashioned virtual way to go, but there is lots of information. And, I just type in CABQ and then fill in anything in the blank. And like 7 times out of 10, you're going to get it right away just off our website. So also want to remind everyone that we all have a role to play in pushing our city forward. So remember, there's ways to volunteer through our civic engagement office. You can engage in that through 311 or our website as well. And want to wish everyone the very best to be safe and also enjoy the cooler